perfectionist. A saboteur who advocates for ideas rather than the people who create and sustain the ideas, as exemplified by those who advocate Western culture, Western philosophy, law and order, economy, civility, morals, etc., without advocating for Westernkind. Antagonist. A saboteur who plays the villain, assuming the forms, language, and appearance of the bad guy in the anti-white narrative. Anti-white. Relating to or characterized by anti-whiteism. A descriptor for thoughts, actions, laws/policies/rules, individuals and organizations hostile to Westernkind. Also a term for anti-white individual. An anti-white. Anti-whites. Anti-white lens. A perspective promoted by anti-whites that leads to anti-white conclusions. E.g., selectively ignoring or minimizing the suffering of Westmen while emphasizing the suffering of non-whites, or holding Westmen to higher standards of morality and agency while providing endless excuses for the behaviors of non-whites. Anti-white narrative. The dominant narrative in the West, wherein Westmen are the antagonists and anti-whites are the protagonists. A product of anti-whiteism, the anti-white narrative is imposed on Western civilization by anti-whites who dominate the nerve centers of the regime. Anti-white oligarchs, an extraordinarily wealthy and or powerful anti-white. Do not refer to such people as elites because by doing so you subordinate yourself to them in various categories, intelligence, refinement, etc. Anti-white precept. The first of the two components of an MP. The anti-white precept of an MP is the actual anti-white belief that is on some level of consciousness accepted as true by the mind. E.g., Westmen didn't create Western civilization, they stole it. The second component of the MP, the interpretive mandate, dictates an emotional response to the precept. Anti-white screed, an MC tool formula to understand and predict anti-white thoughts and behavior. Ceteris paribus, or excluding unusual circumstances. Everything conducive to white well-being is negative. Conversely, everything antithetic to white well-being is positive. Anti-white slur. Derogatory labels that directly or indirectly inflict harm on white well-being or those serving it. For example, the word racist is an anti-white slur. Anti-white slurs are individual pieces of the language of white oppression, white erasure, which is reinforced and legitimized by its use. Anti-white tribunal. Any anti-white or group of anti-whites that sit in judgment meeting punishment for heresy to anti-whiteism. Anti-whiteism, thoughts, actions, and policies hostile to Westernkind. Archetype Alignment Protocol, AAP. A practice that aligns Westmen with the archetype of Westernkind, which, among other objectives, unleashes the indomitable Western spirit within them. This process is called going free. Aligning with the archetype is the goal of going free. Biospirit, crudely defined as instinct. Biospirit is the natural, historic, and expected thought and behavioral patterns distinct to a people. Biospiritual expression, the broadly recognizable expressions of each race of man, which projected onto their environment or their cultures. Biospiritual expression, as it intersects with environment, is synonymous with the word culture. Biospiritual incompatibility, the irreconcilability of biospiritual expressions among the peoples of man. Biospiritual incompatibility precludes multiracial societies, as biospiritual discomfort is the basis of violent balkanization. Chimeras, people and depictions of people in art, children's toys, etc., that are race and sexless. Confront, challenge, and dispel, CCD. An apt technique by which well-being advocates, cued and triggered by internal and external MPs, consciously create counter-triggers in the subconscious mind by vocally or internally counter-asserting with MCs. Counter-asserting. a step in the CCD technique wherein MCs are recited or created as countervailing statements uttered vocally or internally that aggressively counter an MP. Counter trigger, a consciously created subconscious mechanism for the negation of MPs in white noir. Counter triggers are triggered by the triggered MPs with which a person is infected. Craven, a saboteur who encourages white flight or draws well-being advocates away from white positive communities by various means. Culture, the bio-spiritual expression of a race of people projected onto their environment and reflected back from that environment. Curative contagion, an ancillary term for the AAP, going free, referencing an aspect of the AAP's design that enables it to spread easily from person to person. Doom dissector, a content producer who endlessly discusses and analyzes the harm that anti-whites are inflicting on Westman and Western civilization. Doom documenter, a content producer who reports on all the harm that anti-whites are inflicting on Westman and Western civilization. Face anti-whiteism, an AAP technique by which well-being advocates exercise, develop, deepen, and explore the knowledge and skill sets they have acquired for going free. The technique involves challenging anti-whiteism and sharing personal success stories in internet forums, community newspapers, etc. Fantasist, a doom documenter and or doom dissector who frightens his or her audience for the purpose of ensnaring that audience with a false solution. Forced multiracial harmonizing, efforts designed to ameliorate the progressive tension, hostility between racial ethnic groups in racially ethnically diverse populations. Such efforts take various forms and consume massive resources in time, money, energy, and intelligence. Going free, the application and practice of AAP. Aligning with the archetype of Westernkind is the goal of Going Free. Going Free Club, GFC, an independent club whose participants gather for the purpose of going free, as well as helping others to go free. Going Free Friend, GFF, a fellow Going Free practitioner with whom a Going Free practitioner exercises, discussing the lexicon and dialectics of Go Free, and practicing the exercises for mutual benefit. Great White Awakening, the Great White Awakening, Great White Rising, Union Europa, and White Renaissance, is the synergistic and exponential momentum manifested by Westman going free in escalating numbers, marked by milestones that signify the increasing impossibility of arresting momentum. Hate hoax, any covert act committed by one or more anti-whites in the guise of a white person or a people that conforms to the anti-white narrative and thereby demonizes Westman is a hate hoax. Hate hoaxes draw the noose of suspicion around the throats of all white people, and thereby are hate crimes against our entire race. Such crimes are used to justify past, present, and future harm to Westernkind, heresy, deviation from anti-whiteism, hush crime, all acts that victimize one or more Westmen, and by so doing contradict and or disprove the anti-white narrative, and are therefore obfuscated, lied about, downplayed, ignored, or given comparatively little publicity attention by anti-whites. Not all hush crimes are criminal. Some are legal but socially condemned acts. Debunked hate hoaxes routinely become hush crimes. Hush crime is a powerful MC because the premise reveals the truth about anti-white domination of regime news and entertainment media. Interpretive mandate, the second of the two components of an MP. The interpretive mandate of an MP is a form of mental programming that dictates how we are supposed to feel about the first component of an MP, the anti-white precept. E.g., the interpretive mandate could mandate that the infected person feel negative emotions such as guilt in association with a precept that slanders Westernkind as wicked, or to feel more positive emotions such as righteousness or good humor in association with a precept that advocates inflicting harm on Westernkind. Isolationist, a craven saboteur promoting the bunker mindset, the destructive belief that the best course for white well-being is isolating one's family, with several other families on small farmsteads in remote territories. Jealousy and envy, the fundamental motivations of the anti-white. Envy is specifically delineated from jealousy as a feeling of discontent/resentment/covetousness, Westernkind successes, possessions, history, etc. Whereas jealousy is anger rage for a perceived rival who has or is likely to triumph in competition. Keep it Promethean, KIP. An AAP technique by which well-being advocates live their lives and frame their thoughts so as not to conflict with going free. It means that well-being advocates serve the welfare of the community for white well-being. In the phraseology of Prometheus Rising, Prometheans serve the well-being of the Prometheum, which is the Promethean community, ensuring the rapid growth, dissemination, and success of our community. White well-being advocates acknowledge that Westernkind is the most victimized people, persecuted, exploited, and psychologically abused for the totality of their lives. As such, to KIP means that well-being advocates consider transgressions against Westmen, who are not anti-white, to be shameful and disgraceful beyond compare. Meme curative, or MC. A thought or idea that helps to remedy MPs. Includes useful concepts such as numerical courage, forced multiracial harmonizing, and statements such as, there is no excellence where there is equality. Meme pathogen, MP. A thought or idea that is destructive for the individual or group who holds it. In the practice of going free, MPs mostly refer specifically to anti-white MPs. Thoughts or ideas that produce physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual disease in Westernkind. They are lesions on our bodies, minds, and spirits. For example, any belief that white guilts or imposes one-sided moral, intellectual, or sentimental obligations on us that weaken our people in any way is an MP. Meme pathogen montage, MPM. MPs used in combination to support and seemingly validate each other. Mercenary, a type of saboteur with three distinct variants: professional agents, opportunists, and repentant villains. Moralize, intellectualize, sentimentalize, amiss. The pretext and the creation of such pretexts employed by anti-whites to legitimize and justify the harm they inflict on Westmen and Western civilization. To miss pretext is to create, cite, repeat, etc. Anti-white pretexts. Multiracial harmonizing. See the preferred wording. Forced multiracial harmonizing. Numerical courage. The state in which a people, within the body of another people, or peoples, confidently projects their biospirit onto their environment without concern for the other people or peoples. The point at which non-whites within Western countries manifest and project their bio-spiritual expressions, which are at variance with white expression, onto Western civilization. This process initiates a cultural arms race which always ends in oppressive governmental tyranny and violent balkanization. Numerical diffidence. The state in which a people, within the body of another people or peoples, is reluctant to project their biospirit onto their environment for fear of upsetting, angering the other people. Numerical diffidence. The state in which a people, within the body of another people or peoples, is reluctant to project their biospirit onto their environment for fear of upsetting, angering the other people or peoples. Prior to achieving numerical courage, non-whites in Western countries are in a state of numerical diffidence. While in this state, Non-whites superficially conform to the bio-spiritual expression of Westernkind. Opportunist, a variant of the mercenary saboteur. Someone who joins or befriends white sympathetic communities with the intent of severing ties and telling their story for attention and financial reward from an anti-white world eager to bolster the anti-white narrative. Pervasive anti-whiteism. The social, moral, ethical, and legal imperatives with which anti-whites have structured society so as to advance, enrich, and empower non-whites at the expense of, detriment to, and ruination of whites. Potential to power, PTP. The aggregate of one's bio-spiritual potentialities to manifest, attain, and satisfy one's desires. PTP is limited by internal and external factors. Internally, one's unique bio-spiritual composition or architecture establishes one's potentialities. External forces, specifically MPs, undermine the attainment of internal potentialities by inflicting white noir, reducing one's abilities to manifest, attain, and satisfy one's desires. PTP can be positively and negatively influenced throughout life. By going free and reducing white noir, one increases one's PTP, pristine, places/people/states of mind, last things inside Western societies that are largely untainted by anti-whiteism and unaffected by white erasure, having remained in or possibly returned to the pristine state they historically were in. Professional agent, a variant of the mercenary saboteur, a member of organized anti-white operations designed to infiltrate and harm white sympathetic communities. Promethean, a person who is going free. Also an adjective meaning to be befitting of someone going free, in reference to the dignity and honorable behavior of the Prometheans in Prometheus Rising. Prometheus Rising, a book by Jason Cohn presenting an inspirational and edifying myth, crafted for the advancement of Westernkind. Quicksanding, the behavior of dismissing ideas that either do or might serve white well-being without due consideration. From the allegory that a person behaving in this way is like quicksand, sinking all ideas put to them. Regime, the governments, national and international banks, news and entertainment media, academia, and all institutions influenced by these entities. Repentant villain, a role inside the anti-white narrative, played by former antagonists. The repentant villain expresses or feels remorse for playing the villain, and never having truly rejected the anti-white narrative, repents by assuming this complementary destructive role. The repentant villain may silently renounce and abandon white sympathetic concerns, or become actively anti-white, possibly becoming a mercenary in the process. Reputational investment. Putting one's reputation on the line by repeating the thoughts of content producers to one's friends and family. Roadblocking. Any speech or activity such as support shaming and virtue trapping which undermines in any way a well-being advocate's work for white well-being. Saboteur. A person who intentionally or unintentionally inflicts negative influence on white sympathetic communities from within. Types of saboteur described include mercenaries, cravens, isolationists, abstractionists, sectarianists, and antagonists. Sectarianist. A saboteur who divides and weakens the community. Serve white well-being or serve well-being. To improve the lives and structural supports of Westernkind and its expressions. Shame extorting. Instilling shame to extort money for legal and other expenses from white sympathetic people after engaging in high-risk/low reward behavior that harmed or could have harmed white well-being, even when the behavior is claimed to have been in service to the white race. Social lynching. Economic, social, and psychological attacks zealously inflicted by anti-whites on those who intentionally or unintentionally express opinions or engage in acts at variance with anti-whiteism. Social lynching often results in alienation from family and friends, as well as loss of employment, and therefore all of the concomitant losses, that is, standard of living, health care, insurance, home, automobile, etc. Spousing. Entering the white positive sphere with the intent of finding a quality mate with which to abandon the white positive sphere. Support shaming. Criticizing an advocate for white well-being with the intent to undermine his or her efforts for white well-being, for accepting and or asking for various forms of support, volunteer, financial, etc. Note: withholding or questioning support to newcomers to the white positive sphere is not support shaming. Such individuals have to prove themselves worthy of support with self-sacrifice and a history of successful advocacy for white well-being. Tactical frames of thought, TFTs. Another term for meme curatives, MCs. Thought chains. A construct that engenders derivative constructs, thoughts, premises that naturally lead to other thoughts, conclusions. For example, MCs triggering related MCs, or MPs triggering related MPs. Vague. People who have not come into contact with any form of anti-whiteism, or those who are not firmly anti-white but who speak, write, and act, villainy signal, in ways that conform to the anti-white narrative. Villainy signaling. Signaling compliance with anti-whiteism. A behavior sometimes inappropriately described as virtue signaling. Virtue trapping. Criticizing an advocate for white well-being with the intent to undermine his or her efforts for white well-being, for not perfectly exemplifying a virtue that well-being advocates maintain as necessary for a healthy life and community. Well-being, another term for white well-being, sometimes used as a pithier descriptor for something that serves white well-being, such as well-being art, art that serves white well-being, and well-being advocates, people who serve white well-being. Western of Westernkind. Westernkind. White people as a collective and as a historical entity. Westman, a white person. Westman, white people, and white people as a collective. White erase, to inflict white erasure. White erased history. Rewritten history to conform to the anti-white narrative and facilitate white erasure. White erasure. When to the detriment of white well-being. The removal, rewriting, renaming, defacing, expunging, etc. of anything related to or of Westernkind, white flight, white individuals or groups fleeing, physically or mentally, from discomfort such as bio-spiritual disharmony, physical danger by anti-whites, white guilt, white noir, etc. White flight is a stress response or coping mechanism. Examples are moving one's place of residence, quietism, drug use, self-mutilation, dating and marrying non-whites, and committing biological white erasure. The ultimate form of white flight is suicide, white guilt. One of the most destructive elements of white noir white guilt infects Westmen with culpability for the real and fabricated wrongdoings of Westmen throughout history. It obligates us to pay a debt and make amends by way of surrender, atonement, and suffering. White guilt develops in Westmen as a result of being white guilted by anti-whites. Also uses a verb meaning to inflict white guilt. White guilty. White ill-being, a colloquial term used occasionally to mean the opposite of white well-being. White negative. Having concern for the well-being of Westernkind, manifested negatively and destructively, often to the detriment of Westernkind, such as by adopting the role of villain in the anti-white narrative. White positive and white negative are opposite poles of white sympathetic. White noir, multidimensional and pervasive physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual trauma suffered by Westmen as a consequence of MP infection and living in anti-white societies. White positive, having concern for the well-being of Westernkind, manifested positively and constructively, without adopting the role of villain in the anti-white narrative. White positive community, a community of white positive individuals. In the context of going free, our white positive community refers to the going free community, white positive sphere, the totality of white positive individuals, ideas, communities, and entities, white sympathetic, having concern for the welfare of Westernkind. White sympathetic individuals who adopt a positive and constructive expression of their concern for Westernkind by avoiding playing into the anti-white narrative are also white positive. White sympathetic community, a community of white sympathetic individuals. White sympathetic sphere, the totality of white sympathetic individuals, ideas, communities, and entities, including all implicit and explicit white sympathetics, as well as white negative and white positive speech and behavior. White well-being, the welfare of Westernkind and its expressions,